I'd like to introduce Dr. Anju Usman Singh. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very excited about the topic we're talking about today. But before we do that, for those that are watching, can you just tell them a brief history about who you are and what you do and why you kind of got started?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a mom. I have 4 kids, and I'm also board certified in family practice. But my heart is in integrative medicine, so for the last 20 years, I've been studying integrative medicine. I'm on the faculty for M.A.P.S, Medical Academy for Pediatric Special Needs. And I have been taking care of children with special needs and autism for over 20 years now.
And I know you have a compounding pharmacy and a supplement line as well in your practice.
Yes, so my practice is called True Health Medical Center. I have a supplement line called True Health Naturals. And because my own kids have a lot of chemical sensitivities and allergies, and they react to a lot of ingredients and supplements and medications, also started a compounding pharmacy called Pure Compounding Pharmacy.
Well, I feel like you're like the one-stop shop, man. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about our topic today. We're going to be talking about adrenals and what happens with our cortisol levels and our thyroids and all this wonderful things that all of us moms and dads out there, we go through after, I don't know whether it be because we have a stressful life, whether it be age, whether it be the foods we eat. I'm sure the list can go on and on and on. So I know you talk a lot about adrenals, and I'd love for you to kind of help us out. I know my adrenals are shot, my thyroid's going crazy, and my cortisol levels are, through the roof. And I've talked to so many moms, and we're all going through similar stories.
No, I agree. I talk to a lot of parents, and again, as I said, I'm a mom as well. And when you have a child with a chronic illness, it's not like taking care of a cold or a flu where you, at the end of 10 to 14 days, you get a break. And a lot of us never get a break, ever. And the chronicity of taking care of that for years and years takes its toll. So how do we deal with stress? Like naturally, you're out in the world. How do you deal with it? There's a hormone that our body produces, and it comes from the adrenals, as you mentioned, that sit like on top of our kidneys. And it's a very small gland, but it's very, very important. It makes our stress handling hormone called cortisol. But the adrenals also make all our other hormones, female hormones, male hormones. It helps us with sodium and potassium regulation. It also makes our hormones or our neurotransmitters, our brain chemicals that help us deal with stress, epinephrine and norepinephrine, our adrenaline. So when we're under stress, our adrenals get stimulated to make cortisol to deal with stress and to also make epinephrine and norepinephrine, our adrenaline, to deal with stress.
Basically, as we're trying to be in that fight or flight, and that's like what our body's supposed to do. But when we're producing too much of it, now we're in a state that we don't want to be in, because now our thyroid will be messed up because our metabolism isn't working due to these stress levels and our hormones being out of whack. How do we help us? Because being a mom myself, we talk about self-care. I'm very good at talking about self-care. It's about learning how to do it ourselves. And I think many moms and dads out there, we're really great about giving advice. It's about taking our own advice. So where do we start? How do we start taking those steps and realizing, we want to be around. We don't want to die early. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure we're healthy for our kiddos. How do we start taking better care of ourselves to help those levels go back to where they're supposed to be?
Yeah, so like when you mentioned, how do we deal with stress? Our stress isn't going to go away.
It's not.
So we have to come up with tools to deal with it. And if our body doesn't feel well, even if we do those tools, we're eating right, we're getting plenty of sleep, we're getting rid of the toxins in our environment, but yet we may still not feel well. So it may go back to our body is so depleted and it's so fatigued for dealing with the stress for all these years that our adrenals cannot make enough cortisol to handle even little stressors, and then we freak out, or we get overwhelmed, or we develop anxiety or depression. So there are a couple of things that we can do to kind of help feed our adrenals. Because as you mentioned, it's part of this axis. It's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis.
Okay.
And that's our endocrine system, our hormonal system. And it's all connected. And that's also connected to our thyroid. So when our adrenals are weak, our thyroid can be weak. It's also connected to our blood sugar regulation. That's another hormonal system in the body. So when our adrenals aren't functioning optimally, our blood sugar can fluctuate as well. So there are some things that we can kind of do to help regenerate ourselves.
And what is that? I've been to many doctors and they say, oh, reduce the stress, go to the gym, meditate, which all sounds great. And I try all of that. But is there more that we can do? I mean, I know I've tried to eat a healthy diet and reducing, different sugars and such. I talk to so many parents, and it's so sad because you hear them cry because their jeans aren't fitting, and it's one more added stress level to already being totally stressed out. So now we're dealing with that. And I think it really does mess with your psyche because, here you're doing everything what you think, quote unquote, right, and nothing's changing. And so I didn't realize up until I got into my 40s to all these other moms what we were dealing with. And now on Facebook, we really can all talk. And I can't tell you how many hundreds and hundreds of families I'm seeing that are dealing with this.
Well, as I mentioned, those adrenals produce our stress hormone cortisol, but it also produces our female hormones. And so when we start going through menopause, our ovaries say, okay, you don't need to make any more. Let's rely on our adrenals. And if our adrenals are already fatigued and not making our progesterone and our estrogen, then when we go to rely on the adrenals, there's nothing there. So a lot of the moms I talk to are having menopausal symptoms in their 40s. And they're
really
having
early
perimenopause in their 40s. So as you mentioned, what can we do about that? I mean, obviously the lifestyle choices that you mentioned are really important. I kind of think about it as like a three-pronged effort to help bring the adrenals back. Number one is diet, so blood sugar. We don't want to have highs and lows in blood sugar. So we need to eat on a regular basis, and we need to have some protein in our diet with each meal to help maintain that blood sugar. And we don't want to have big meals with a lot of carbs and sugar, because when you eat a lot of sugar, your cortisol levels will go up. You'll feel better because your adrenals are so fatigued, but then your body will make more insulin and you'll crash.
I think all of us have done that.
And then you'll feel like you need that caffeine, or you'll need something. So eating on a regular basis. Sometimes taking things like a B complex or vitamin C around lunchtime instead of doing like a Red Bull or a caffeine or a Diet Coke, whatever else we might reach for. That B complex can help feed the adrenals with some nutrition that it needs to work better. So, something like that might be helpful. So diet is really important. Number two is we can use herbs and spices to help our adrenals feel better. And so to give you some examples of spices that you can use, cinnamon, for instance, helps with blood sugar regulation. So just adding cinnamon, to your coffee.
Like a simple thing.
Or your tea.
Yeah.
Can help with blood sugar regulation. Turmeric.
That's a great one for inflammation,
right? A great one for inflammation. And ginger. So I don't know if any of you guys like tea, but one of my favorite things to tell moms is to drink tea. You can carry it with you. You can take a bag of tea with you and add hot water. You can get free hot water at Starbucks, so it won't cost you any money. But ginger tea is another really good anti-inflammatory. There's a Indian herb called tulsi, Tulsi. The English word is holy basil.
Okay.
But when you buy it over in the stores, oftentimes they'll say tulsi. Nobody will know what it is. But it's a great herb for the adrenals. And the term for those herbs are called adaptogens. They're herbs that help the adrenals work better. So if the adrenals are working too high, sometimes our cortisol is too high. Like in the middle of the night when you can't sleep and you're wide awake, it's because you reversed your diurnal pattern. In the morning, you can't wake up because your cortisol is too low. And at night, you can't go to sleep because your cortisol is too high. So these adaptogenic herbs help to modulate cortisol. So if it's high, it brings it down. If it's low, it brings it up. Things like ashwagandha, holy basil, ginseng are very nice adaptogenic herbs.
And that's something all of us can do at any market. We can find, I've seen all of those at the market, so that's really great. Mm-hmm. Anything else we can do to put the oxygen mask on us first? Because often, as you know, you're a mom, we put our kids first, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think sometimes we forget and we put ourselves on the back burner. And, you know, when you were saying eating regularly, I can't tell you how many moms I talk to, you'll say, I haven't eaten today. And you talk to a dad, it doesn't seem like they seem to always remember to eat. Women, I just think, are a little different, where we can go all day without eating, and I think that's super important to keep that regulated, as you said.
Yeah, so, you know, as I mentioned, that three-prong approach, diet, eating, and avoiding carbs and sugar.
Which is probably the hardest one.
Then you don't want to do things to stress your body out even more. I call them excitotoxins in terms of the diet. So excitotoxins is going to excite an already depleted system. So MSG, NutraSweet, red and yellow food dyes, nitrites, sulfites, high fructose corn syrup, caffeine are excitotoxins that can increase adrenaline, increase excitation in the brain, and we don't want too much of that. There's other things you can do to kind of down-regulate your system. We're constantly on the go, and we need to have times where we're not always doing, that we can also just be. And for some people, that is light exercise. Again, if your adrenals are really stressed out, you don't want to go out and do a lot of cardio. You won't be able to handle it. And a lot of people feel bad because they just are so tired. They can't exercise. So even just starting slow, taking a walk.
Or if you have a dog, like I do that often, just taking my dog on an extra walk, you know.
Even just doing breathing exercises. They say that humming downregulates your nervous system and your sympathetic nervous system. There's a technique called the emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping technique where you just tap yourself very gently. You can look at videos online for it, but it's a really simple technique to down-regulate when you feel yourself kind of getting overwhelmed and overly excited, to do some of those things: humming, singing, chanting, praying, breathing, meditating, tapping. Those are other things that can down-regulate the sympathetic nervous system that's kind of overly excited. And then, again, in terms of a biomedical approach or an integrative approach, we work on down-regulating your sympathetic nervous system. Again, there's different supplements and nutrients that can do that. And then up-regulating the opposite of fight and flight, which is rest and digest. That's your parasympathetic nervous system.
Which I don't think a lot of moms, especially dads do, but moms really aren't resting enough.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of just that humming is a really good idea. And I know for me, one of the new rules I'm trying to implement in my lifestyle is not talking on the phone when I'm in the car driving, and just listening to music and getting from point A to point B without having that stress of whether it be work or home or whatever, just having that time, whether it be 15 minutes just for me. So things like that I feel like moms can do. You know, that's an easy thing we can try.
Yeah, and I think that rest and digest piece, when we're digesting, we need to rest. Some people are eating and they're on their phone or they're doing something else. We're always multitasking. And to take that time to really sit and enjoy your meal, to think about your food and to digest it, it's extremely important. Because we're in that fight and flight mode, that's going to stress out our adrenals, that's going to cause our cortisol to go up, that's going to increase belly fat. We don't want any of that.
No, we don't.
We don't want any of that. And then the high cortisol inhibits thyroid function. So it prevents our inactive thyroid from being active. So it prevents our T4 to go to T3. So a lot of our thyroid issues are really from stress and high cortisol. And then the high cortisol inhibits our immune system and decreases secretory IgA. And then we get sick. So, there's a lot of things that we can do. It just seems so overwhelming when we have so much on our plate. But just to take a deep breath, just to take a step back, just to, turn the volume down a little bit. Take away one or two extra things that you're doing. Instead of saying yes, learn to say no.
That's great advice. Yes.
I'm not good at that.
I'm not good at that either. But that's great advice.
So, just say it. No.
No.
And then I think another big one is we're so hard on ourselves. And one of the people that I talked to help me deal with stuff, she said, just write on a sheet of paper, which, just even to take 5 minutes to write stuff down sometimes stresses you out, but to say that you forgive yourself. Because a lot of us put blame on ourselves for what's happened to our children. And we're constantly feeling guilty that we don't do enough. And it's never, never, ever enough. Whether it's taking care of our husbands, taking care of our parents, taking care of our kids, we're never enough. And just to say to yourself, I am good enough. And even though you really don't need to be forgiven, I think we just to say it. God forgives us. Why can't we forgive ourselves?
Absolutely. I think that's so powerful. For those moms that are listening right now, what's the message you want to leave to them to say, hey, we got to take care of ourselves. We want to be around.
That, what you just said, and that you're good enough.
I love that.
And you don't have to constantly prove it.
Love that. We don't have to constantly prove it. I always love talking to you. And so thank you so much for being here, Dr. Anju Usman Singh. I think that we've just learned so much. And again, if nobody gets anything out of this other than we are good enough,
we are,
then that is wonderful. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.